Hey Luminary, it's Leslie Tagorda here with another episode in our Planetary Process series exploring Saturn. Well, Saturn's process is to turn doubt into mastery. And you know what? It is a heavy lift to not buckle under his pressure. But why is reframing Saturn's work so important? Well, the result is divine brilliance in your life and work. Welcome to Star-Powered Astrology for Changemakers. I'm Leslie Tagorda, your guide, a Hawaii-born Filipino-Jewish astrologer who loves navigating visionaries like you through the spiritual journey of your work so that you can be inspired to lead by your chart and become the luminary leader you were born to be. All right, welcome back. I'm super excited to continue on this planetary process series where I'm sharing with you a preview of the course material in my intensive called Celestial Cycles. In celestial cycles, we go through all of the different planets, their processes in our life and our work. We also talk about just how they move through the sky, shows us the different life cycles that we are in. So I want to share with you this excerpt of my premium content, Celestial Cycles, as it's presented in my astrology library. Now, in the astrology library, of course, we take it much deeper because we go into interpretation, like how do we interpret in our own chart? We go into how do we implement it in our work and our life and so much more. But here is everything I want you to know about Saturn and why it's so important to work with Saturn. Before I dive into the content, I just wanted to let you know that one of the reasons why Saturn has been on my mind so much is that when we are releasing this episode, it's going to be right after the full moon in Capricorn, ruled in Saturn. And just a few weeks ago, Saturn was stationed retrograde. And for all of my water clients, water risings, water suns, water moons, oof. We have been feeling that pressure because at the time, Saturn had been sitting station retrograde at 7 degrees of Pisces for what seemed like forever, putting in that squash. But at least for me, my Pisces midheaven, I totally am feeling it. But we reframed that energy and still, instead of feeling buckled under that pressure, is really coming in and focusing in our capacity on what matters most. So at this time of this Saturn retrograde cycle that I'm working with my team right now, our personal word, a Saturnian word, if you think about it, is snatch, as we are all tightening things in to make it much more focused and crystallized. So my friends, really enjoy this Saturn episode, and I want you to consider why you need to reframe your Saturn in your natal chart and how you want to choose to work at that highest mastery of Saturn. Saturn is next out, and Saturn's primary role is to contract, meaning to bring in. It's another one of the social outer planets, and it rules both Capricorn as well as Aquarius. Now, Saturn is much further out, taking 29 years to go around the sun, spending about 2.5 years in each sign. The deities that represent Saturn would be about like Kronos, the god of time, and also Saturn was the son of Uranus. And Saturn's real process is to focus, to master, to bring in. And so Saturn can really be thought of as one of these planets that has like this karmic entity. I know that Saturn can feel super heavy for so many of us, and we all tend to dread when we have our Saturn returns around 29 and also between 58 and 60. But Saturn, as the Time Lord, is showing us that at each level, we are up leveling to a different type of maturity and expertise. And so Saturn is the authority figure, but we have to change that relationship with the authority figure so that we're not giving our authority or our power to others. Instead, we're finding our own inner authority and expertise. To do the inner awakening of Saturn is to
understand that sometimes we have to contract and bring in. Sometimes we have to create boundaries to separate, to tighten. Sometimes there's pressure, but how do we deal with pressure? Whose goals are we going after? What do we feel about age and maturation? What do we feel about duty, obligation, and responsibility? And to whose duty, obligation, and responsibility are we activating in our lives? We have to get secure with structures and boxes and definitions and reframe oftentimes the hierarchical structures that are put on upon us by institutions or other oppressive systems, or the structures that we want to create for ourselves that allow us to bloom. Of course, authority figures, social boundaries, expectations, putting our power in other outside masters and gurus, rules and doubts, all under Saturn's domain. But when we can really master Saturn and evolve to its highest expression of, we can see that Saturn allows us to crystallize our ideas, our mission. We can see how we have grown in maturation, not just age. We can see how we can turn to ourselves for self-responsibility and accountability. We can see how these boundaries create trellises that allow our jasmine to climb up. Because after all, if jasmine doesn't have a trellis to climb, it fades, it flounders, it can't grow towards the sky. That's why Saturn represents the bones in our body, because that allows our bodies and our flesh and our muscles something to grow onto. Saturn teaches us how to prioritize, see ourselves as authority, create our own boundaries so that we can focus on what matters for us, create our own expertise, because you are an expert with all of your experience in something, to feel masterful, to direct, to design, to discern, to architect, and to engineer. And to me, of all of these planets, Saturn is one of the most significant planets to track, because Saturn transits show us our greater success and mastery cycles. Robert Hand says Saturn represents what you really want in life and is helping you get it. Most people are out of touch with what they truly want. If you thoroughly understand your needs and wants, you will find that Saturn simply brings about their manifestation. So remember, I always talk about Saturn as that strict grandpa who really just wants your success. So Saturn's process, of course, is to contract and crystallize, master, mature, create boundaries, responsibilities, commitments, and restructure. Now, the reason why we track these Saturn transits is because we are evolving and coming face to face with our responsibilities, with our maturation, and success in both our inner and outer lives. Saturn is always asking us, how do we feel about maturing? What boundaries are needed? What or whom are we committing to? Are we in a box, meaning a structure? Do we like this box? Who created this box? Did I create the box? Who is keeping me in this box, right? That's why these structures and boundaries and obligations and duties, you can think about those boxes like that. What are your responsibilities versus your duties? Are you satisfied with your life successes, both inner and outer? What regrets might you have, and what will you recommit to? And so Saturn is always asking us these questions, and where in the natal chart Saturn is transiting is showing us where we are ready to we're ready to evolve, and we can get more specific with these questions. Now, Saturn impacts several life cycles every 7 years, because Saturn takes about 28 to 30 years to go around the chart. Our Saturn return that happens right around 30, right around 60, right around 90. Again, these ages are approximations. All of those squares and oppositions are also significant life cycles. So when you're born, Saturn is at its natal position. In 7 years, it goes to that first square, just like a first quarter moon phase at age 7. Saturn then is at opposition at age 14. Saturn then has that closing square at age 21, and then Saturn returns back to its natal position at 30. So you can already tell, and especially if you have children or if you've raised children, or even just from your experiences growing up, these ages 7, 14, 21, and 30 are massive, massive developmental years. Right. There's a lot of different developments from 0 to 7, but at 7, a child really has his sense of self. They are starting to explore outside of their parents. They have really separated away from their parents, having a sense that they really are their own person. There might be inner struggles, and where that Saturn square is by house is going to show you some of those struggles. If you are raising little kids, then you can support them by understanding where they're breaking free from their previous structures. Now, at 14, when we're really starting to hit puberty again, this is another massive development cycle in the aging process. And at 14, now this young person has this they can look back to when they were born, and now they have these opposing views. Instead of their life being so inwardly focused as it was before, now they are starting to seek relationships and starting to understand themselves from the inside out or the outside in. And so that is one of the big developmental processes of 14. And always, because it's an opposition, if you are raising a teenager or want to talk to your teenage self, you can take a look at the house opposite your natal Saturn to discern what kind of themes you are really integrating and trying to resolve in your life at that time. Now, at 21 years old, Saturn has that closing square where it's getting ready to come back. And this is where, in most Western cultures, we celebrate adulthood, where people are of the legal age to do almost everything. And we give carte blanche to a 21-year-old saying, hey, you've made it. Here's your life. And that 21-year-old astrologically isn't quite yet an adult, but they are now coming into a phase of another maturation cycle where they're like, there is a deeper level of understanding. Usually, if a child has been kind of misdirected, they'll start to have that urge to get more direction, even if they don't really find their direction till they're 30. And you know what? That is completely okay. Till 28 or 30, when the Saturn return starts, is official entry into adulthood according to astrology, where now we're ready to up level. We are ready to commit to being a contributor into society. And so, for those of you who haven't yet had your first Saturn return, know that you are not supposed to have things figured out yet. You're really not supposed to have things figured out until sometime after 32. So you are not too late. For those of us that do find success early in life, I'll be sharing how in the exercises, how we can look at how Saturn is going through the different houses can show us also like, hey, we all have different success cycles based on where Saturn was in our natal chart at birth. The two major life cycles that I want to share are the Saturn return and the Saturn opposition. So the Saturn return allows us to step into another level of maturity. Of course, from 0 to 30, we are just a youth. Once we hit that first Saturn return at 30, then we are an adult and we have an adult phase for the next 30 years. When we hit 60, we move into that mentor stage. So if you're between 60 and 90, if you're still working like an adult and not fully embodied into your mentorship role, your managerial role, your role of like guiding others, it's really, really difficult and really against your energy to be continuing to work like an adult after the age of 60. You still have a lot to offer, but what you're offering is the lessons from your life experience as a mentor. And then, if we're also lucky to get to that elderhood of age 90, we are here as an elder, as a sage, as a wise one, as a spiritual seeker. It's so beautiful to see astrology in this way. A Saturn return takes about a year to happen, and it goes through 1 to 3 exact passes. Now, the other thing that we don't talk about too much is the Saturn opposite Saturn. And this happens at age 14, around age 44, and again at age 74, where we're being asked to integrate those coming face to face with our responsibilities both in and out. And we can take a look at these Saturn oppositions about the areas of life that really come into focus when you know the axes, meaning the house that contains your natal Saturn and the house opposite, where Saturn transiting Saturn will be at this time in midlife. Now, the 14-year-old, we talked about that 14-year-old kind of coming into consciousness and seeing themselves in greater society and not just so self centered. The same thing happens between that 43 and 45-year-old, one of our midlife transits, our midlife awakening transits, where if you're somewhere between 43 and 45, this is kind of like your make it or break it time. You're really thinking like, have I lived my life to what I want it to be? And if it's not, this is my chance to break out of those ruts and create new systems for which I want to live. This also takes about a year, and oftentimes it'll have one or three exact passes. Oftentimes, it's also going to be correlated to your Uranus opposition, which is the most important midlife aspect, as well as your Pluto square. So if you're somewhere between 38 and 50 and your life is going, what? Well, it's a great time of awakening and just such an amazing time to like dip into your power. It's really nothing to be feared for. It's like we are so lucky we get to experience this. So, of course, when we're looking at your Saturn oppositions, remember to look at the astrological axes, the oppositions for personalized themes that may happen to you during those Saturn oppositions. So, let's take a look at transiting Saturn by house as well as by planet. So remember, Saturn takes 30 years to go around the natal chart. And as it transits around your natal chart, it'll spend about 2.5 years to transit a house. Robert Hand says, when Saturn transits a house, if you're in a good position, one that is appropriate for you at this time in your life, the transit will firm up and structure that house for you. If you're not in a good position, Saturn will bring great changes that might be unpleasant insofar as you resist them. Again, that resistance often creates the, the suffering. Okay, so Saturn in the first house. As Saturn moves into your first house, it crosses the ascendant. Again, like a rebirth of this Saturn cycle. Such an important time. One of the most significant houses for Saturn to turn self doubt into self mastery. This Saturn in the first house can often feel similar to a Saturn return because of the nature of the rebirth of that Saturn cycle. During this time, it's important to focus on what success means to the self, leadership, identity, and initiative, going inward to prune away all the parts of you that you won't take with you on this next evolution of success, committing to being the most successful you that you desire. The first house, as the opposite of the seventh house, shows you the way that you respect yourself will directly impact how others respect you. In 2.5 years, Saturn will then move into the second house, giving you the time to focus on what success means to you, your worthiness, your values, and your bottom line. Outward markers of success like fancy cars and houses and more stuff, are they really important to you? Commit to elevate your own worthiness, values, and how you add value to the world. An important house to validate your true values and master your worthiness and money. Robert Hand writes an amazing passage about this house to consider on page 319 of Planets in Transit, excerpted without permission. So I'm sorry if this is going against what I'm supposed to be doing, but I needed to share this with you. If material wealth is keeping you from discovering your true values, then you are likely to experience financial losses. Otherwise, your circumstances will probably be all right. Next, Saturn moves into the third house, focusing on what success means to your mindset, inner dialogue, habits, and the way you engage with others in your everyday life. Commit to your ability to communicate your needs and your message, as well as commit to being able to understand those around you at a deeper level. This is the last of the houses in the quadrant of self that you are here to master. An important house to master your mindset, your inner dialogue, and how you perceive and navigate your closest areas in your world. In 2.5 years, Saturn will cross your Imam Coeli into the fourth house so that you can focus on what success means to your emotional safety, innermost private life, and family dynamics. Commit to intergenerational advancements, parenting, caretaking, healing early wounds around being parentified as a child, and conscious work around inner security. As the opposite of the 10th house, the greater security you can nourish within yourself and be responsible for prioritizing your own care, the more you can rise in your public and work life. It's an important house to master your most innermost life and ability to feel secure at home and within your family. Next, Saturn moves into the fifth house, focusing on what success means to your ability to seek out passion, play, pleasure, and creativity. Commit to heal your ability to receive joy and attend to your inner child. While things may not feel enjoyable at this time, and while there may be opportunities to learn about being a child in a child role or to parent a child, these opportunities will have lessons about what you do and do not want. An important house to master your passions and joy. Later, after 2.5 years, Saturn moves into your sixth house, focusing on what success means to your daily practice and routines. If you've been committed to your work and service to others, this is a time where you may be recognized for your service. Commit to how to break free from obligations from higher ups so you can prioritize your wellness and wholeness if there's an imbalance in control. It's an important house to master your effectiveness. After that, Saturn crosses your descendant and enters your seventh house, another significant time, especially as Saturn crosses that descendant, triggering your entire angles, the structure holding up your natal chart. At this time, it's really important to focus on what success means to your relationships and understanding of your authority and control in relationships, partnerships, and collaborations. Commit to how you, with whom you collaborate and relate to others. Are there commitments that are outdated in your partnerships? Now, you can notice the themes from 14 years ago when Saturn last crossed this house for themes around relationships that you are being asked to continue to master. So, hopefully, you're at that spiral journey, but you're a whole level up. As Saturn crosses the descendant, it comes above the horizon where now Saturn has completed a 14-year cycle of looking inward. And now it will focus its sharing its mastery outward in the world. As opposite the first house of self, the more you understand what success is to you in relationships, you'll have a better idea of yourself. An important house to master in relationships and your role in relationships. As Saturn moves into the eighth house, it's now time to focus on what success means to your ability to transform and joint finances like taxes, debts, and liabilities, maybe some shared income, maybe some inheritances. Commit to your relationship to life and death, as well as trust with others. An important house to master your psychological relationship to death and your own finances, especially those tied to others. Saturn in the ninth house now focuses on what success means to your beliefs, purpose, and vision, even your morality and who you are in this world. Commit to what you can truly envision and open your mind to. Be responsible and accountable for your life's purpose. Continue being curious about what you now believe to ensure your beliefs are not limiting. As Saturn gets higher on the natal chart, you are one house from the Saturn cycle peak. Your success is gaining if you've stayed your course. As Robert Hand says on page 324 of Planets in Transit, if you do not know who you are now, you will probably have to wait until the next cycle to find out in 7 to 9 years from now. And that's when Saturn will then transit the first house. An important house to master your beliefs and connecting the dots of everything that has gotten you here. Now, Saturn crosses that midheaven at the tippy top of your chart, entering the 10th house, where Saturn naturally loves being as the ruler of Capricorn. This is the tippy top of your success cycle for Saturn. It is time to focus on what success means to you, your public, your professional life, to achieve expertise and inner authority. Commit to how you will leave your mark on this world and be visible. If you've been committed to up to this point, you are likely to have peak success. Not that things will all go smoothly. Saturn always has its lessons that allow you to recommit to your success. This is a time where people see your successes and offer you more responsibilities, and you are tested to commit to those opportunities that are there for you and that you desire. As the opposite of the fourth house, the more you focus on your outward life, it is equally important to focus on your inner life and family. An important house to master what you are here to deliver in the world, your mission and your public reputation to leave your mark in the world. Next, Saturn leaves the 11th house, another traditional house of Saturn as the ruler, the house of Aquarius, where now it is time to focus on what success means to your hopes for the future and how you will contribute your successes back into society for social impact for your people and your soul communities. If you've been putting effort into achieving your dreams, this is the time where you will see it come to fruition. Commit to how you will contribute to society and achieve your dreams. Saturn's cycle, as it leaves the 11th house, is coming to a close, a house to master your dreams and contributions to society. Lastly, Saturn enters the 12th house, the closing of a Saturn cycle so it can begin anew again. Focus on what your next cycle of success will be by clearing away and attending to unfinished business, reviewing what success meant and what you will and won't need along the next cycle. Commit to acceptance and not controlling things. There will be things that clear out of your life at this time, and to grasp and hold onto them for dear life will make this time so painful. Trust that you won't lose what is not meant for you, and that you are clearing the way for your next success cycle. Focus on what allows for more ease, flow, and bliss at this time. So I hope you are not fearful of Saturn. Ultimately, Saturn wants your success and achievement. Let's take a look at Saturn as it impacts your natal planets as it goes around the natal chart. As I had the example in the very beginning, remember that a Saturn transiting one of your natal planets takes about a year to transit a planet. The aspects that are most important to really analyze are the conjunctions, the oppositions, and the squares. So, just like Jupiter, Saturn with the sun can be focus and creativity, which equals crystallization. Saturn plus the moon, focus and security, which equals emotional boundaries. Saturn aspecting Mercury can be focus and expression, which equals significance. Saturn and Venus could be focus plus connection, which equals commitment. Saturn and Mars is focus and activation, which equals accountability. Saturn and Jupiter, focus and expansion, which of course is success. Saturn and Uranus, which is focus and change, which equals dismantling. Saturn and Neptune, focus and inspiration, which is consciousness. Saturn and Pluto, focus and power, which is restructuring. Saturn, which is focus plus commitment, equals a new level of maturity with the Saturn return.
All right, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this deep dive into Saturn and thinking about all the ways that you can work intentionally and reframe how you feel about the heaviness of Saturn in your life and work. If you loved this episode, please consider sharing this episode with your business besties, with your astrology loving friends, or share this work even further and consider leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. The more reviews I have, the more this work spreads out into the world. Till next time.
As a human design projector, my energy shines more brightly because of people like you who share my work. If you enjoy this podcast and want to help build a movement of innovative astrology and leadership and spark the intuitive revolution, please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, or better yet, share this podcast with your change-making besties. We will all shine brighter together as we create the future we want to see.